courageous. God calls us to be a people of courage, of boldness. I trust that you have already enjoyed our first 2 weeks. This is our third week in this series. I hope that many of you have taken advantage of the devotional guide that we have provided. It's a 40-day devotional guide on this whole teaching topic. Our staff has compiled it for you. If you still didn't pick one up for whatever reason, there are some available at the Welcome Center. We would love to give that to you before you leave. Courageous. God has called us to be courageous about vision. Vision is so critical to our personal lives, a vision for your life. Vision is so critical to the life of a church. It senses clarity and direction and focus and direction. If you look in our society, any organization or company that does well and is successful is usually because a company has a vision. They have a target. They have a goal. They're striving for something. In fact, some of those companies and organizations in our society exemplify what it looks like to truly fulfill a vision. For example, Harley Davidson. Any of you here love getting on a hog and motorcycling your way through town? Wow, not very many of you. Oh, there's more ladies that enjoy this than men. That's interesting. But the vision for Harley Davidson, for instance, is to fulfill dreams through the experience of motorcycling. Now, for those of you who enjoy that, you know what it's like. There's nothing like that open road, and there you are riding along it. How about this organization, Starbucks? I tend to visit Starbucks more than I do get on Harley Davidsons. But the vision for Starbucks is this: to share great coffee with our friends. That's nice, isn't it? Especially a pumpkin spice latte. Ooh, $6 at your local Starbucks. And help make the world a little better. So that should appease the pain. At least we're making a difference when we buy them. Great coffee. How about Hilton? The Hilton hotel chain, their vision is this: to fill the earth with the light and warmth of hospitality. Can you just envision yourself on a nice, comfy bed with about 12 pillows around you? The vision of Hilton. What about Kraft Foods? Very simply, to make today delicious. Everything tastes better with cheese, doesn't it? And then finally, one of my favorites, or one of my boys' favorites, Toys R Us. Their vision is this: to put joy in kids' hearts and smile on parents' faces. For some reason, I don't have too many smiles on my face when I leave Toys R Us. There's more weeping and gnashing of teeth. Young families and parents are going, yep, I know what that's like. No, you can't have that. But vision, it's so critical to any organization. If they want to be successful, they've got to have a focus. They've got to understand who they are and who they aren't. Vision is critical to life, isn't it? In fact, vision is defined like this: the ability to see. It's the ability to see something that you imagine, a picture that you see in your mind. It's something you dream about. It's something you imagine. It's something that may not yet be, but you are doing everything you can to ensure that it becomes. See, visions are born in the soul of a man or a woman who is consumed with the tension between what is and what could be. A person of vision has that tension that they live in. What is and what could be. And they do everything to ensure that what they see, what they envision, becomes a reality. They're fueled by vision. The reality is, the Bible teaches us that vision is critical. In fact, Proverbs teaches us Something so profound. In Proverbs 29:18, it says this, where there is no vision, the people perish. Where there's no vision, people die. But he that keeps the law, happy is he. You see, when you are not driving towards something, when you are not being fueled by something that is much greater than yourself, you begin to die. You begin to wonder, what am I living for? What is the purpose of this thing called life? In fact, I've been thinking about God's grand vision these days. You see, God is a God of vision. Do you believe that? He has a grand vision. And part of his grand vision is this. Luke 19:10 so simply says it. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save that which is lost. Part of God's grand vision is that none shall perish, but all have everlasting life. As 2 Peter 3:9 so well says, the Lord is not slow in keeping his promise, as some understand slowness. He's patient with you, not wanting anyone to perish, but everyone. Talk about a grand vision. This is no small vision. This is no vision that just talks about a cup of coffee or a motorcycle. This is talking about the entire human family. His wish is that none shall perish, but everybody come into a relationship with Christ. Talk about a grand vision that our God has. And as I thought about God's grand vision, I was caught up with the fact that God's grand vision includes me. And it includes us. Notice what Paul says in Ephesians 2:10. We are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do what? To do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. When I read that kind of verse, I am just so encouraged to know that God has created us. He's intricately designed us. He has a destiny in mind for every single one of our lives. In fact, he has created us. We're his handiwork, and he has already prepared good works for us in advance to do. What are those good works? It is to get enveloped into God's grand vision of ensuring that none shall perish, but all have everlasting life. It is to be caught up and be part of this grand vision to ensure that none shall perish, but all have everlasting life. What a vision to be enveloped in. And so this morning I want to talk about a courageous vision. And I want us to go to the book of Nehemiah. Nehemiah is one of those books of the Bible that teaches us in many ways how vision begins, how vision is inspiring, how vision can change things. It teaches us this tension about what is to what can be. Nehemiah. I encourage you to open your Bibles. It comes right after 1st and 2nd Chronicles and after Ezra the prophet. You'll find Nehemiah there. But let me give you the context of the milieu and the society that Nehemiah walked into. You see, the Babylonians invaded Judah. They invaded the people of God, and they destroyed the city of Jerusalem. They destroyed the city of God. And not only did they destroy the city, but they knocked down its walls, and they brought down Solomon's temple. They destroyed the house of God. And because of that, the people of God scattered all over the empire. About 70 years after this first Babylonian attack, there was a king in Persia. His name was Cyrus. And he said to the Jews, listen, it's been 70 years since your city has been ransacked. It's been 70 years that your temple has been brought down. Why don't you guys go back to Jerusalem and rebuild it? Why don't you start doing something of benefit? And so things seem to be going up. Things seem to be opening up for the people of God. Things were looking up for a while. It seemed as if Israel was on the verge of becoming a blessed nation again. But the people, however, refused to turn away from the very sins that God had judged their ancestors for. So even though this Persian king said, hey, why don't you guys go back and rebuild, the people of God were still caught up with other faiths and other gods, because when they got scattered to begin with, they began to worship other gods. The temple was not being maintained. So though they rebuilt it, it was not being maintained. It was the sacrifices to God were not being worshipped. The Jews continued to adopt the religious practices and culture of the surrounding nations. And by the time Nehemiah's story begins, the political and social and spiritual condition in Jerusalem were deplorable. It was horrible. And so one day Nehemiah is sitting there, and he's got an amazing position. He is the cupbearer of the Persian king, Artaxerxes. I mean, he is living in royalty. He's got a position that people would line up for. And one day, as he's doing his thing, his brothers came over who had just been to Jerusalem. And so Nehemiah thought to himself, hey guys, how's Jerusalem these days? How's the city of God? How's the temple? How are the people of God? And the brothers had to give him an honest report. And they said, listen, Nehemiah, it is not going well at all. It's deplorable in many ways. The walls, they're all in rubble. Sure, they built the temple, but there's no sacrifices to the Lord. There's no worship. People are worshiping other gods. It's really discouraging, Nehemiah, at the state of their situation. It says in Nehemiah 1:4 that his burden, when he heard these words, drove him to a prolonged period of prayer and fasting. Even though Nehemiah had a great posh position, when he heard those words, something in his heart got tweaked. Something in him began to burden him to the point where he wept, where he confessed, where he sought the face of God, asking God, this cannot be. Little did he know that these deep feelings were the initial birth pains of a vision that people would be reading about thousands of years later. Here we are today. You see, the point is this. Nehemiah's vision didn't begin as a vision. It began as a concern. It began as a burden for his nation and his people. So here's the deal, friends. Where is our burden level for our nation, for our city, for our neighbors? Do we have moments where our soul aches at the condition of our society and all the work that needs to be done in our city? Because, friends, it's in those moments where we're burdened, where visions begin to spark, where vision is birthed to the point where there is this level of awareness, there's this level of commitment, there's this level of wonder of what can be rather than what is. You see, the reality is, this milieu that Nehemiah walked in, it wasn't an encouraging one. In fact, the scriptures say that it was a time of general spiritual malaise and apathy that had settled into the people of God. We know this because one of the minor prophets during Nehemiah's time, Haggai, he helps us understand the context a little bit more in chapter 1 and verse 9 in Haggai. He says this, you expect much, but see, it turned out to be very little. What you brought home, I blew it away. Why, declares the Lord Almighty? Because of my house, which remains a ruin, while each of you is busy with his own house. See, Haggai was giving us a little sense of what it was like in Nehemiah's day. You see, the people of God had gotten themselves so consumed with their own lives and their own houses and their own affluence, meanwhile, at the neglect of the house of God. And then Nehemiah gets burdened by the Lord. And a generation later, it was a priest named Ezra and a governor named Nehemiah who themselves stepped in with their reform movement with great results. And so today, I want us to delve into this story of Nehemiah and get a glimpse of what a courageous vision is so that we can ensure we are people of vision. Because where there is vision, where there is no vision, the people perish. Number one, in this courageous vision out of the life and ministry of Nehemiah is this: a courageous vision always includes an element of fear. Now you might say, Pastor Joel, that's not really encouraging. People of vision shouldn't fear. Listen, if you've done anything that is much bigger than yourself, you have experienced fear, haven't you? Let's not pretend. To be a man or woman of faith doesn't mean you don't have moments of fear. Of course you do. In fact, Nehemiah did as well. I mean, think of this moment. Here he is, cupbearer of the king. God has burdened him with this vision to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. Meanwhile, he's still having to do his job. But he's got this burden that he's carrying around. So one day, as he's doing his job, the king, Artaxerxes, says, "What's going on with you, Nehemiah? Usually you're more jovial. Usually you've got a smile on your face. You seem downcast. What's the deal?" In fact, Nehemiah 2:2 illustrates it for us. "So the king asked me," Nehemiah says, "why does your face look so sad when you're not ill? This can be nothing but sadness of heart." And look what it says next. "I was very afraid." Who was he afraid of? He realized the king had noticed something was up. And he realized that he would have to give the king an answer as to his burden. He realized that he was going to have to begin to iterate with his mouth what it was that God was asking him to do. Now you might say, well, what's the big deal? Why didn't he just ask for a leave of absence, go do the project, come back? It wasn't that simple. You see, Artaxerxes had stopped the rebuilding project of the temple in Jerusalem years before. So he had a track record of not being a supporter of this kind of thing. Now Nehemiah, the cupbearer of the king, was the one that God chose to burden with this vision. And so Nehemiah knew that as he would share this, as he would make this ask of his king, he didn't know where that was going to go. He didn't know how the king would respond. He didn't know if the king would get him killed. He didn't know if he would have lost his job. He didn't know what the outcome of this conversation was going to be. And so he was afraid. He was afraid. You see, anytime you do something for God, something big, something courageous, there will be moments where we're afraid. We're afraid to make the ask. Think about this. As the conversation continues, this is what happens. Nehemiah, with that question of the king, why are you downcast? He says, "King, I got to be honest with you. My people in Jerusalem are in a very discouraging place. As you are well aware of, the walls are in rubble. The temple is neglected. Things are not going well. The people are discouraged. The people are worshiping other gods. And I feel God has called me to go there to help them build." As he utters those words, the story goes on. King Artaxerxes says to him, "Fine, Nehemiah, you go. You go and do what you feel like you need to do." And then the conversation continues. I mean, Nehemiah is a courageous leader, isn't he? He says to the king, once he gets his approval, he says, "Oh, and by the way, king, I have to travel through a lot of different border crossings to finally get to Jerusalem. Do you mind writing me a letter that will get me safe passage through all the other empires so nobody murders me on the way? Do you mind writing me one of those letters?" "Well, sure, Nehemiah, here you go." "Oh, and while you do that, King Artaxerxes, I was thinking you have a connection with that other king over there. He's got tons of forest. We need the wood that he has to rebuild. Do you mind writing a letter to him as well to see if he would donate those resources so we can get the job done? King, sir, please? Well, sure, Nehemiah, I can do that for you. Can you imagine if Nehemiah allowed fear to paralyze him? Can you imagine in that moment when he was afraid, if he just backed off, if he just kept his mouth shut, if he just didn't tell the king what was on his heart, if he didn't risk it, the walls would have never been built. The temple would have still stayed in neglect. The people of God would still worship other gods. He would have never gotten the letter of safe passage. He would have never gotten the letter of donations related to wood. Wow, that vision would have never happened. Friends, as we embark on this vision, fueled by it, to build the house of God in the city, there will be, if you haven't already experienced it, moments of fear. There will be moments where we're going to have to make some asks, where we're going to feel a little bit of fear there and timidity. But that's where courage rises up to the surface, where we begin to speak on behalf of the work of the Lord and ask him for his favor. You see, a courageous vision always includes a bit of fear, doesn't it? Number two is this: a courageous vision includes prayer. Notice when he's having the conversation with King Artaxerxes, when King Artaxerxes asks Nehemiah, hey bro, like you seem discouraged, what's on your heart? And then it says, I was afraid. Notice what it says next in verse 4 of chapter 2. Then I prayed to the God of heaven, and I answered the king. So I'm not sure what that looked like. He's having conversation. The king says, what's wrong? And then it says, I prayed. While I was afraid, I don't know if he just turned around or he says, hey, king, can I just have 2 minutes? And he's like, oh God, I need your favor. I need your direction. I need your words. I need you to help me right now as I talk to the king. And so just like the vision started with prayer and fasting, as he continued on all through the book of Nehemiah, there was incredibly focused amounts of prayer that went into this project. Because anytime you're doing and trying to accomplish a God-sized dream and vision, there will be moments where the people of God are going to be called on their knees and say, God, as I speak to this city official, may you grant me your favor. As I speak to this bylaw officer, may you grant us favor. As I speak to this potential donor, may you give me the words. There will be all kinds of those moments. And maybe that's the whole point to any vision, that the people of God would be dependent on him all the way through. That we would grow in our intimate relationship with Jesus because a courageous vision calls us to our knees. In fact, I am absolutely convinced that those who are the boldest for God have the greatest need to be in prayer. Those are the boldest for God, are the ones who have no other option but to learn how to pray. And maybe part of the reason sometimes the North American church has fallen away from their knees is because we're not bold enough. We're not living courageously enough. We're not taking risks for the glory of God enough. But when we take those risks and when we live boldly for God, I don't know about you, but I am experiencing this every day as we embark on this vision. You're finding a pastor who realizes he needs to stop sometime and just pray because we need God's faithfulness. We need his favor. Nehemiah learned that. Together, may we journey through this Fueled by Vision campaign on our knees all the way through. God, we need you. We're taking a bold step. We need your intervention. We need your intervention. Number 3, a courageous vision includes people. A courageous vision includes people. As I was meditating on this entire book for the last several weeks, I noticed Nehemiah chapter 2, verse 10. Something really important. You see, there was naysayers. There always is, right? There's always those who oppose the work of God. In this sense, there was a man named Sanballat and a man named Tobiah. They didn't want the walls to be rebuilt. Well, look what it says in verse 10 of chapter 2. When Sanballat, the Haranite, and Tobiah, the Ammonite official, heard about this, they were very disturbed that someone had come to promote the welfare of the Israelites. Were they upset about the wall? No. They were upset that somebody was going to stand up for a people. The people of God. That's what disturbed them. That this vision surrounded people. You see, God's vision for Jerusalem centered around the people of Israel, not the walls. You see, the walls, they were simply a tool in the hands of the people. The wall would keep the Israelites safe from their enemies. The wall would bring back dignity and respect for the people. The wall would help keep the faith of the people in check, rather than their faith being assimilated into other gods and religions. In the end, the whole point to the vision was to rebuild the people. Are you hearing this? Courageous visions should have everything to do with people. Shouldn't surprise us, because that's what Jesus' grand vision is all about. To seek and save those that are lost, wishes that none shall perish but all have everlasting life. Jesus is on a mission to redeem the entire human family. Well-known Chinese proverb says this: if your vision is for a year, plant wheat. If your vision is for 10 years, plant trees. If your vision is for a lifetime, plant people. And I have been on a journey, because I believe as a pastor, I am not only here to be a pastor of you, the people at Heartland, a church connected, but I believe God has called me to be a pastor of our city, a pastor of our region, because these are the people that live in the greater Toronto area. And so I've been researching and learning more and more about our community. There are times where I'll take drives throughout our city just to ask the Lord to increase my burden for our region and for our city. Do you ever do that? Do you ever, rather than just go from one place to another, just pray through the community? Ask God for direction? And so as I have been doing that, I've also tried to get as much information about our community as possible, because the more educated I am, the better positioned I am to serve it well. Make sense? The reality is that the region of Peel, for instance, is by population 1.3 million people, according to the 2011 census, which is the second largest municipality in Ontario after Toronto. Peel region is a rapidly growing area with a young population. In fact, the median age of the Peel region is 36.9. Astonishing, the Peel region has a total population of new Canadians, immigrants, of 650,000 plus, which means half of the Peel region is new Canadians. See, Peel is one of the most racially diverse places in Canada. The 2006 census recorded that Peel's population is comprised of people who reported to have over 200 different ethnic origins, speaking more than 70 different languages. In 2006, 50% of Peel's population identified themselves as a member of a visible minority group, double the percentage for Ontario and the rest of Canada. You see, Peel is the second most popular destination choice for new immigrants among the Greater Toronto Area municipalities. Between 2001 and 2006, on average, 2,000 new Canadians arrive every month. That's our region. That's our territory. That's who God is asking us to engage. That is who God wishes that none shall perish, but all have everlasting life. And He crafted us and He planted us in 1986 in order to be part of His grand vision of ensuring that none shall perish and all have everlasting life. That means reaching and engaging with the Buddhist, the Muslim, and the Hindu, and the Sikh. God loves them, and He died for them. And so our job is to position ourselves to reach them. Courageous vision always includes people. Fourthly, a courageous vision includes teamwork. I don't know if you've ever accomplished some of the greatest accomplishments of your life. It usually includes doing it with teammates, because a vision worth reaching and striving for shouldn't just be accomplished by one person. It means you're not dreaming big enough. If you're dreaming God-sized dreams, it's going to take all hands on deck, because it's much bigger than one person. And so it was reality for Nehemiah's day. You see, teamwork starts with healthy leaders who lead by example. In Nehemiah chapter 3, verse 1, it's noted, Eliashib, the high priest, and his fellow priests went to work and rebuilt the sheep gate. See, the priests didn't just stay on the sidelines and say, hey, you do this, you do that. No, they got themselves engaged in the project. It starts with us as leaders, doesn't it? It starts with me. It starts with our deacons. It starts with our leadership team. That's why next Sunday at 5:30 at our dinner kickoff, we will announce what just we as a leadership team have prayerfully contributed to the capital campaign. We did that for a reason. We're going to do that for a reason. Because if we don't have our commitment on the table, how can you ever expect to be committed to it? And so we have a leadership team who's dead serious about this. And we will sacrifice and we will do whatever it takes to build the house of God in the Peel region, so we're better positioned to reach more new Canadians, more high at-risk youth, more under-resourced families, so that we can populate heaven together. But it's going to take all of us. You see, Nehemiah chapter 3 is a beautiful chapter. There's a lot of names. There's a lot of family names written there. And at times we just kind of skip through those chapters. It's kind of like, I can't say half of the names anyways. But the reality is they represent dedicated teammates who got the job done. And each family, as you read chapter 3, we don't have time to do that this morning, took their portion of the wall. I could just hear those conversations with Nehemiah. Hey, Nehemiah, you can count the next 100 yards. They're my families. We'll take that. We'll get up early. We'll do whatever it takes. We'll sacrifice. We'll go without something so that that portion of the wall will get rebuilt. Literally, their daughters and their sons were out there rebuilding the wall. Family after family after family. You see, it takes teamwork to see a courageous vision accomplished. John Maxwell said this, coming together is a beginning, keeping together is progress, but working together is success. But the reality is, let's face it, we got to live in a real world and be realistic. In every courageous vision, you can always expect some to remain as spectators. It's just the reality of life. And so was it reality for Nehemiah. In chapter 3, amidst all the families that were engaged, there's this group that wasn't. Verse 5. The next section was repaired by the men of Tekoa. But their nobles would not put their shoulders to the work under their supervisors. The nobles were like, hey, we like your project. I think it's great. Bless you. We can't wait to reap the benefits of all the work you guys do and all the sacrifice. We'll just see you on the other side. There will always be spectators to every vision. But here's a word to any potential spectator. There will always be some for a variety of reasons, and they are so creative, that will not engage in the work. The reality is that ministry is a privilege. And involvement in kingdom work is a blessing. If Jesus told us it is more blessed to give than to receive, then that's the truth. When we opt out of being part of the work of God, we are the ones that lose out. So here's my pastor's heart coming through here. I sincerely, with all my heart, don't want any of you to miss out of God's blessing. When you commit and devote yourself and sacrifice yourself, both of your time, your treasure, your talent, friends, you will live a blessed life. It is more blessed to give, Jesus said, than to receive. Just want you to know that my family is not asking you to do something that we aren't willing to do. In fact, I have, along with Sylvia, have already submitted our pledge, because we wanted to be the first ones, to the capital campaign. And let me tell you, we are giving an amount that we've never given away in our lives. And it scares us tremendously. I could have said that a different way. But you know what? It feels good all at the same time. Because we're investing in something that is much bigger, much more important than my own beautiful house on Gooch Crescent in Milton. It's true. And there will be sacrifices along the way, but boy, does it feel good to bless and be engaged in the work of God. Number 5, and lastly, this morning, a courageous vision includes and concludes with God. You see, the reconstruction of the wall was clearly the catalyst for the people's renewed interest in God and His law. Did you hear that? It was a catalyst that got the people more consecrated to the work of the Lord, more consecrated to the relationship with Christ. It took a vision to get them back there. Remember, they had spiritual malaise and apathy? But this vision fueled them into a more intimate relationship with Christ. But it is almost as if the wall had been forgotten. There's no mention of a celebration until the very end of the book of Nehemiah. Nobody even suggests a party. You would assume there would have at least been some sort of ceremony to commemorate the success of the project. But nobody seems the least bit interested in that sort of thing. Their attention had shifted from the vision of a rebuilt wall to the author of the vision. You see, that's the whole point, friends. That at the end of this journey together, we will have learned faith. We will have learned prayer. We will have learned to be close to our Father like we've never been close to Him before. You see, when God intervenes, the attention shifts to Him. Divine intervention, when it is recognized, results in what? Authentic worship and unquestioned obedience. This is God's ultimate agenda for the visions that He has given you and I. He's at the end of the vision He has authored. The point is, we're going to burst with praise because along the way, we're going to have seen His intervention over and over again. And this will be a place of worship because we have seen the hand of God. I love it. For the eyes of the Lord, says Chronicles, move to and fro. His eyes, they're moving to and fro throughout the earth, that he may strongly support those whose heart is completely his. He's looking now, scouring the planet, looking through Peel region, saying, who is fully surrendered and committed to my purposes, because they are who will receive my strong hand of support. How important is it to you and to us that the Lord strongly support what we're doing? If it's important, then our hearts must be completely his. When we embrace what is important to him, we bring our heart into alignment with him. When your heart is completely his, you are blessable. You are blessable. Okay, I conclude with this morning. It's a personal journey. It's a personal journey that I've been journeying through in the last several months. But just this week, kind of some of the dots are being connected for me. I was driving from our location here, 145 Traders, to our Tompkin property. And I went down Traders Boulevard to get to Kennedy. And as I was arriving to Kennedy, I looked to my right, and what did I see? I saw a Buddhist temple. Phap Van Vietnamese Buddhist temple on 420 Traders Boulevard. And it was like the Lord arrested me there. He kind of stopped me dead on my tracks. And he started to burdening me. He started to put a burden, even more so, for the Buddhist people of our community. And I thought to myself, I wonder how and when this temple was built. And so after I had traveled through town for a bit, I came back to the office and I began to do some research of the Phap Van Buddhist temple on 420 Traders Boulevard. And I discovered that the devoted followers of the Buddhist faith had built that temple in the year 2000. In fact, just a few years ago, they were honored to have hosted a $5 million jade Buddha that they had transported there. And literally thousands of people drove down Traders Boulevard, drove past 145 Traders Boulevard, because they didn't even know there was a church there. And they went to worship a jade Buddha. It's valued at $5 million. Thousands of them came. Then my mind went to an unbelievable facility that I'm sure many of you have seen off of the 427, the Toronto Baptist Sri Swaminarayan Mandir. And I'm sorry if I misrepresented that word. But it is an amazing facility. In fact, every time I drive by it, I think, wow, that is massive. Well, it was dedicated on July 22nd, 2007. Prime Minister Harper was there. Our Premier was there. They shared some pretty inspirational words, and I don't have time to get, but there's some interesting things said at that event. But I did some more digging about that Hindu temple, which is considered an architectural wonder in Toronto. It costed them $40 million to build. So I thought to myself, well, there must have been some grant that they applied for. The government must have given them some funding, and maybe that's why they were there. But as I researched, I discovered that the $40 million was without a penny that came from government funding. And they list this on their website. The Baptist Sri Swaminarayan Mandir Temple is a tribute to the devotion of Indo-Canadians to Hinduism. Every last penny came from the Hindu people themselves. who were completely devoted to their religion. I just kept reading. This was intriguing me as I was prayerfully looking at all this. The entire project is made by Italian marble and Turkish limestone. It's a first for Canada and was created entirely by the Hindu communities of India and Canada. About 2,000 Indian craftsmen were hired, with about 100 of them flown to Toronto, while another 1,800 remained in India to sculpt the finely detailed carvings with chisels and hammers. What they created, it says in the article, is astonishing and could be considered one of modernity's wonders of the world. I don't know about you, but you got to hand it to the Hindu people at their devotion to the religion. Why do they do all that? Well, they probably do it because they want their kids to have a temple to go to. They want the community to know that they're there. And then as I was wrestling through all of this, I thought of just even in Halton, this massive project that the city of Oakville has just given building permits to. It's a mosque. It's a mosque that will be built in Oakville. All the monies, $15 million of it, will be raised by their own worshipers, the article says. Eventually, this 3-story center, which includes a 21-meter high mosque dome and towers rising 30 meters and 2 full-size gymnasium, dressing rooms, meeting rooms, will rise on the 11-acre piece of land. Once all the phases are completed, the center will have 5,700 square meters of floor space, making it Ontario's largest Islamic center. One of the Muslim leaders says this: "We are not only building a mosque, we are building a community center." Farouk, the leader, continues and he says, "There will be a pathway for joggers right around the project that will be available for everybody in the community." And then he concludes with these words: "We're adding to the mosaic of Canada." Friends, these are not our enemies. They're the friends that God is asking us to build a bridge into their lives. But friends, we need to make sure that the Church of Christ is visible in our city. We need to make sure that our kids also know where there is a church, where they can hear the Word of God preached. We need to make room, and we need to devote ourselves, just like all the other religions of our community, so that the house of God gets built and done right. And so just like I've showed you all the other images, I show you the piece of God's grand vision of reaching people in the greater Toronto area with the message of Christ. It's what Heartland, a church connected, could look like. We know what it looks like now, but God is asking us to dream forward as to what it could look like tomorrow. Not only for ourselves, but for future generations. And for all people groups that are found in this region, because we need to introduce them to Jesus. So I ask you, just as God has asked me, be fully devoted.